Professor Reddy, and the distinguished friends. I am, at the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to Lord Vikupari, guest of honor, for agreeing to release the book, and I had the benefit of listening to one of the most learned, inspiring speeches. I hope that your speech alone has made it worthwhile for me to take the journey. I am grateful. It is memorable, and I hope the Gujarat Federation of Industries would publish it as a pamphlet. I also heard a very touching speech from Alaknanaji, and I had already requested her, like I said, personally, to send me the script of what she spoke. And after the touching and inspiring speeches, mine will be sort of pretty mundane, dealing with the subject that I happen to have chosen before. Partly because that's about the only familiar territory for me, but I will do my best to make it sort of interesting. In the recent past, yes, our country has accelerated economic progress impressively after 1990. But many of us forget that many other countries also did about the same time. Actually, if we see the growth, the high growth in India, which was high compared to the past, coincided with the high growth in the global economy. And that's something we have to remember. But that, as it happened, many of the people started saying that India and China should not be treated as emerging market economies, that they should be treated as re-emerging market economies. Because according to history, in 1700 or thereabouts, 25% of the world GDP was accounted for by India, 24%. And China accounted for another 25%, Japan 3%. These three countries accounted for more than 50% of the GDP of this world. So people now say 200 years is not a big time in the history. So please don't describe India as an emerging market economy. We are just re-emerging. Some people feel that we should try to recreate the glory of India of the 18th century. My submission is that we should be careful in trying to recreate the ancient glory. Ancient India might have been rich compared to other countries, but it was obviously a society which was weak, vulnerable to attacks from other countries. The society at that time was full of discrimination based on caste and creed. The society was feudalistic. The society was exploited. There were huge inequalities. So we must carefully aim for a future India that would be not only prosperous as it was centuries ago, but also just and equitable, while preserving the natural resource endowments and promoting egalitarian society of the country for the benefit of future generations. This is a hard and difficult task. Let us explore the prospects. At the time of independence, many people believed that India cannot be a viable country in view of diversity of languages, to an extent that there are several nations within India. But I think I did not go into the history, but thanks to constitution makers, we have built fairly good institutions to virtually ensure that India emerges as a vibrant, democratic, reasonably secure nation. I think that we can take credit for. In particular, giving oath to every citizen, irrespective of violence or Second, giving vote, the vote in India, many countries where you have to go and register to vote. In India, it's the responsibility of the government to go to your house and register you for a vote. That's unique. Not many countries. There's another one. In many countries, people have to fight for equality in the political process, particularly women. Incidentally, in a country like Switzerland, many women in many countries did not have vote till 1967. I think these are some of the solid achievements which we should not forget. Having said that, what have we achieved since independence? I'll be very brief. Yes, can be described as good, but not good enough, since a large number of people still remain poor, illiterate, and undernourished. The progress in the recent past may be better than the past, but our progress is not satisfactory compared to what other countries which started at the same level have achieved, be it Korea, be it China. Almost all emerging market economies, except some continents, have performed better in terms of eliminating poverty, increasing the literacy with public health. Some of our neighbors have done better than us. So from now on, therefore, we have to very carefully assess why and what should we do about it. And I'll be quite brief. You know most of what I'm going to say, but I'll try to put them together. When we were young, I think 30 years ago, we economists talked about the population problem. If you recall how we have to control the population, etc. And now we don't talk about population problem, we talk of demographic dividend. So you got a lot of people, young people, that is good. So anyway, that reflects that economists can't think really long term, as people like you say. But the fact remains that young youth is a source, from an economic point of view, provide a source of demand and supply for commodities. So therefore, in some senses, economic activity in India will increase. Sheer demand. Second, and here there is a sort of a strength that usually in many countries like in India, one-child policy, all the people, there's a huge bulge of youth and all of them become old. In India, the demographic profile is different in different states. In Kerala, we have already reached a stationary population. In Andhra Pradesh, we are almost there. Perhaps Gujarat will be there. UP and Bihar fell far behind. So in a way, the demographic transition will be stretched. And in that sense, it will not be such a shock. So that could be a strength. More recently, the global financial crisis affected many countries. In India, we don't have that serious problem with the financial sector. To that extent, it is an advantage. It has been an advantage in some other countries also. Some countries like China, which have progressed very well in the recent years, they depend very heavily on export demand, and therefore they feel that that if the export demand comes down in the advanced economies, then it is quite possible that they will be affected. For us, our dependence on export demand is not that high, and we are relatively more balanced, at least till recently. We are not having too much of current account surplus or too much of current account deficit. The household savings in India are high, actually are par with China. It's the government which spends more than what it should. In fact, the strength in Indian economy is the household savings. The government is leveraged, they borrowed more than it should. The large private sector is highly leveraged in India. The large private sector, not the small and medium. And that you can see how it is getting reflected in the bank's balance sheets recently. So these are the weaknesses. But I think the households also are becoming somewhat disappointed. The financial savings are coming down. and their investments. So basically, the savings, which apart from the lifestyle, the savings are essentially, the final analysis, India can develop only with domestic savings. It cannot depend very much on foreign savings. All through in history, more than 90% of investment is from domestic savings. So we may have to woo the domestic savers who are more stable and contribute 90% compared to the non-domestic sources, which contribute in any case less than 10%. I think this is the strategic thinking that we may have to draw, particularly after the crisis. Now, these are perhaps the strengths, but let us quickly go through the challenges ahead. I referred to the demographic dividend, but the demographic dividend can be a demographic disaster if the young people don't have enough employment. They cannot have enough employment if they don't have skills to compete in a globalizing world. So there is an equal danger that demographic dividend can turn into a demographic disaster. Physical infrastructure like power, you know what's happening. There are very few countries where the quantity of power and the quality of supply of power is as bad. Ports in Gujarat are good, but on an all-India scale, ports, roads, broadly, what we may call the physical infrastructure, is weak, undependable. When you go to social infrastructure, education facilities, but many parts of the country, A, the average is coming down, B, things became costlier because there are many poor people simply can't afford. Even middle class people can't afford. And that destroys the hope of the younger people for the future, the hope of the parents for the children. And that can be very debilitating to society as a whole, at least for our generation. We had this view that you work hard, not so much money you can make it good in life. So this is the other challenge. And the manufacturing sector, manufacturing activity which provides employment is very small base. Actually, we are insourcing the services, but we are outsourcing the manufacturing industry. The trade deficit is close to 10%. We get only through services exports. So, and then finally you have the organization, which requires a lot of investment. In short, you have severe problems in regard to social infrastructure, physical infrastructure, skills, and vertical mobility. Considering the large population, the available water resources will be excessively consumed unless effective actions are taken for economic use of water. And as I said, most of these require investments by government, which again means you require good governance. The future of India will be considerably influenced by the developments in the global economy. And the developments in the global economy indicate three things. That one, the traditional approach to economic development is full of risks and may not necessarily assure you growth on a longer term, whether you call it capitalist system, non-capitalist system. Second, it may not be sustainable. It may not be sustainable both in terms of natural resources and in terms of social cohesion. The model of development that was practiced before the crisis, rather than the crisis is still on, the global financial crisis has become global economic crisis. It is almost becoming global political crisis. It is definitely becoming global social crisis. Therefore, the first and most important lesson for India is that the economic model adopted by the rest of the world may not, so far, may not be the right model. It also means that the reform agenda that we thought of before the crisis may not necessarily be the right one. So it is not push the reform, but review the reform and then undertake the reform. So I think there should be a paradigm shift. Now, there was a reference to 9% growth. The limited point is this 9% growth happened in extraordinary circumstances. And it resulted in a global crisis. So obviously it's not a good model. A global economy was favorable. And it was so favorable, it was a boom. So the new normal will be different. If the people expect that the new normal will be the same, then it will be naturally followed by another crisis. If we don't want a crisis, we should recognize that the new normal will be different, has to be different. Both the goal will be different, and how to achieve the proper goal will be also different. And I don't think there is enough appreciation of this importance of change in economic thinking, which I briefly referred to. There's a lot of change in economic thinking. And there are also change in what should be the appropriate policy. In fact, there is branch economics of happiness. So, on balance, and I will read out the last part of my prepared talk. On balance, what would India be like in future? India will continue to be a land of opportunities with a rate of growth of the economy at around 7 to 8%, and more progressively supported by an impressive growth of working population. It will continue to be the second, if not the first, among the fast-growing large economies in the world. India will be more globalized, and people of India will have greater opportunities, but also more intense competition from the global economy. Indian businessmen will have opportunities globally, in addition to those within India. Our children are now better than before, most not all. And our grandchildren will be having even higher standards of living than us and our children. Incidentally, in most advanced economies, many people are not sure that they will be able to continue their current standards of living. They are not confident that their children will have at least same standards. And therefore, there are going to be divergence of expectations of the people between advanced and developing economies. But this bright prospect for India, which I mentioned, may be endangered if our children and grandchildren want to copycat or imitate the standards of living of advanced economies like the United States of America. If all Indians want to adopt the standard of living of advanced economies, the system will draw more from Mother Earth and nature than what the Earth can sustain in India. Imagine 1/3 or 1/4 of American size, 3 times the population. Imagine every family having 2 cars in Baroda. There will be no road to drive the cars. And then you can go on and on. So that's the limited point I'm making. In fact, austerity for us in India is not only a personal value but a social compulsion to conserve natural resources and also to ensure social cohesion. Our children and grandchildren cannot be in a good society in India if we fail to tackle problems of education, health, employment and environment. Gandhiji said that there is enough on this earth to meet everyone's need, but not enough to meet everybody's greed. So Gujarat is a good example of individual enterprise in India, and I hope it will also become a role model for social consciousness in managing water, energy, environment, and appropriate lifestyles and social cohesion. Thank you all, my friends.